All right, couple of quick things. I apologize. Like I am behind the ball on some things right now. It's just been with last week being as crazy as it was with lacrosse and then sports getting postponed and all this stuff. Like I'm behind the ball on some stuff right now. But just so we know, your vocab quiz for this unit is next Monday. Okay. And then the test in here is next Wednesday. Am I breaking up right now? Am I lagging a little bit? Okay. All right. As soon as I start using Screencastify, it slows down. So just tell me if I lag too much and I'll repeat anything I said. Okay. Um, I'm going to try to have the study guide up by Thursday. But I still need to make the test. And so yeah, that's why there's like a delay. I kind of like everything kind of like crept up on me a little bit. So I'm sorry about that. All right, so let's talk about forgetting. So amnesia. Amnesia refers to any sort of loss of memory. Okay, now generally it's referring to like chronic loss of memory, meaning like loss of memory that so many emails. Chill. Um, it generally refers to chronic loss of memory, like things like Alzheimer's or whatnot. But amnesia is just any sort of loss of memory. Generally, it is the loss of explicit memory. Okay, meaning things that you know. Right? Generally, it's the loss of like knowledge, life memories, things like that. There are two different types of it. What we're kind of talking about right now is what is called organic amnesia, which is biological, meaning it is amnesia that occurs due to a stroke, an aneurysm, a TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury, anything like that. There is another type of amnesia that we'll talk about later on, what is called psychogenic amnesia, which is amnesia that is psychological, meaning there is no physical cause for it, but essentially what they think it is usually is a response to stress. And people essentially like their brain is just kind of like, or their mind is kind of like, fuck it, I'm just clearing everything out right now. Okay. And like all of a sudden everything just gets wiped clean. We see this with something called dissociative fugue or psychogenic fugue, which is where people who have this happen to them will lose all their memory, but then go on like unanticipated travel, and they'll end up in like a city with no knowledge of like how they got there, or sometimes even what their name is, and but it's entirely psychological. All right, and we will talk more about that later on when we get to clinical psych. Now, amnesia can affect us in two different ways. Okay, following a cognitive event. That's what, yeah, it could be a stroke, aneurysm, TBI, anything like that. Anterograde amnesia is when, after the cognitive event, we cannot form any new memories. They remember things from before the cognitive event, but not after the cognitive event. Okay? So we can remember this as antero occurs after. Okay? They can't form any new memories after. Generally, this is going to be due to damage to the hippocampus. And for asynchronous today, I have a video and a little response thing for you to do that deals with these. Okay, I think it's a video you'll find interesting. Guy who has no memory whatsoever. Okay, all right. So anterograde amnesia is when we can't form any new memories. Does anybody know what movie is this? Hmm? Guys, can I get cameras on, please? What movie is this where can't form any new memories? What? That wasn't the one that I thought people would say. Since yeah, but you and Ben both yeah. So Memento deals with this, which is a movie that probably most of y'all have never heard of, but it's Memento is Christopher Nolan's first movie. The guy who did the Dark Knight trilogy, and it's about a guy who has a traumatic brain injury and he's trying to solve a crime, and he has anterograde amnesia. He can't form any new memories, so he tattoos clues all over himself. And then it's kind of a like the ending. It's a pretty kind of a crazy movie. Like it's very like whoa, but it's good. And then yeah, 50 First Dates, which is the one that more people know of. Retrograde amnesia is when we are unable to remember stuff from the past. They can form new memories. They just can't remember anything from before the TBI. Okay, so retro, just remember retro is past. This is generally due to damage to the cerebral cortex, the outside layer of the brain where the vast majority of our memories are stored. Anybody know what movie this is? I came out when I was in high school, I think. As Channing Tatum, Rachel McAdams. They're in a car accident and she can't remember anything from before the car accident. It's kind of a chick flick, but it's pretty good. Everybody knows what it is? The Vow. It was like similar to like the Notebook kind of. All right, well, you are looking at me like I'm crazy. All right, so forgetting, just general forgetting. So amnesia is more like a chronic thing. All right, general forgetting is the result of a couple of different things, and these are pretty straightforward. If you understand encoding, storage, and retrieval, then you should be able to understand relatively easily how they can screw up. So, an encoding failure is when we fail to get the information from short-term memory into long-term memory. It's in our working memory, but we fail to encode it. So this is what generally happens when you are trying to multitask and you realize that one of the things that you were doing, you don't recall doing any of it. So those of you that like play video games the whole time during class, and and you think you're being smooth, like I can generally tell when somebody is doing that. But those of you that play video games the whole time during class, you're like, oh, I'm listening. Like, no, you're not. Okay, you think you are, but your brain is not actually retaining any of that information. even if you are, there was somebody in first block today that I called out for it, and he didn't even respond, which means he just had the camera on. He couldn't even hear me talking. That may have been why this person got like a 20% on the midterm. Um, but yeah, so it's when we can basically say with encoding failure, it's like the phrase like in one ear, out the other. And I know again when I'm using Screencastify, writing on the screen does not really work all that well. So I'm going to put a picture up on the screen. It is of 15 different pennies. And I want you to look at them and I want you to put in the chat in private message to me, all right, which penny do you think is the real penny? Like which is the real face of a penny? Okay. All right, we got one that is correct. All right. Why is this so hard? You see pennies all the time. Hmm? Anybody have an answer? Okay, why is this so difficult? Even though we see pennies all the time. All right. Okay. I don't know who's it. Rory, what did you say? Okay. All right. Yeah. Even though we see them, we're not actually studying them. Okay. Which makes it so even though we see them all the time, we don't actually encode what they look like. The correct answer is A. Okay. Which I believe only one person put. Okay. All right. Forgetting can also be storage decay. Storage decay is when the information got into long-term memory, but there's no rehearsal. No rehearsal of the information. And so eventually, if it's information that's like learned, eventually it's going to go away. Right? Just think about it's so dumb the way that they have some stuff set up with school where like you all like think about if you have like a math class in the fall and then you don't have another math class until the following spring, all right, how much of the information that you learned you don't retain, all right, because of storage decay, because you're not practicing it. Same thing with like foreign languages. Okay, all of those classes, math classes and foreign language classes should all be A-Day, B-Day. So storage decay is when it's in there, but you don't rehearse it so it doesn't stay in there. All right. So Hermann Ebbinghaus, which is a guy that we've talked about before, right, with the retention curve, also wanted to study the rate at which we forget information, right? What he called the forgetting curve. And he used the same like nonsense syllables that he did with the retention curve. Okay. And what he wanted to see was how long would he be able to retain these if he didn't rehearse them. And what he learned from this is that we forget at a predictable rate. We forget at a predictable rate. All right. And what he noticed was that he forgot a lot of stuff very quickly. All right. His retention of the syllables dropped by about 30% over one day. But then what actually happened was it leveled off. And probably that same thing is going to happen for you with this class. All right. After the AP exam, you're going to forget a lot of the stuff really quickly. But there's going to be some random stuff from this class that just sticks with you. Okay. And I don't know what it's going to be. All right. It could be information. It could just be something not even psych related that you remember. But I still remember stuff from my AP Psych class, my senior year of high school, which was almost 16 years ago. Be 16 years. I turned 34 next week, and so I've been out of high school for almost 16 years, which is crazy. But yeah, so are there any questions there about that? And then finally, there is retrieval failure, which is where the information has been encoded and stored, but you just aren't able to access it at the moment. A lot of times because of lack of retrieval cues or lack of context. Sounds like last time when we talked about how, like, if you go from one room to another to get something and you forget what you wanted to get as soon, like what you don't remember why you were in that room. Okay, and the best thing to do is just go back into the room that you came from. That's a retrieval failure. Tip of the tongue phenomenon is a type of retrieval failure where you know that you know something, you just can't quite get it out. And a lot of times you just got to change context, change retrieval cues, all right, all of those different things. Interferences are also examples of retrieval failures. An interference is when one piece of knowledge, one memory gets in the way of remembering something else. Basically, one memory is blocking the access to another memory, which can happen. And I'm going to go over these and then I'm going to give you a mnemonic to help you remember these. Because these are terms that they love asking about on the FRQs, on the AP exam. Retroactive interference is when new stuff that we learn gets in the way of remembering old stuff. Okay. You have a hard time remembering things from your past. Retro means past. So when you learn new information in here, and that makes it harder to remember stuff from Unit 5, that's retroactive interference. Proactive interference is when stuff that you have previously learned gets in the way of you remembering new stuff. Okay, so you could say pro means like going forward, or it, stuff that pro is previous. So like, let's say that you had a dog and your dog died, and then you got a new dog and you called the new dog by the old dog's name all the time. That's proactive interference. All right, the mnemonic to help you remember this is, and hopefully this will, porn. Proactive. Old interferes with new. Retroactive. New interferes with old. All right, so should be a mnemonic to help you. I had a lot of students in the past, like they, wrote the mnemonic all over the AP exam, and that's perfectly fine. Right? I did not come up with this. I think that this is a pretty well-known one. I did not come up with this one. All right. So, are there any questions there? All right, last thing, motivated forgetting. Motivated forgetting is when we just kind of conveniently forget about something. Um, it's called a conscious coping strategy, but generally, these are when we kind of maybe, a lot of times it's when we convince ourselves that like something didn't happen that did actually happen. So has anybody in here ever done anything like embarrassing or bad or whatnot? And then somebody asks you about it, you're like, I don't remember doing that. Okay. Where it's not repression. Repression is a Freudian idea. Okay. This is more so like being in denial about something. Donald Trump is a master of this, of saying that he didn't do something or say something that they have on video him saying or doing. Okay, so just we're sometimes just motivated. Tell us something. Landon, that's more so what we're going to talk about next. This is more so about forgetting something rather than altering a story. You just act like you have totally forgotten it. All right. Now, we're going to do a little activity. Everybody needs to get out a sheet of paper and a pencil or pen or marker or whatnot. All right. So what you're gonna do is I'm gonna show you a list of words. Okay, there are 21 words. I'm going to show them one at a time. And then after we're done, I'm going to have you write down and recall as many of them as you possibly can. Okay? Pretty straightforward. Everybody ready? All right, here you go. All right, write down as many words as you can on your sheet of paper. All right, let's see how you did. Okay, I'm going to put the list up there, and I just want you to see how many of them you got correct. There you go. All right, so let's see. Just raise your hand. Who got like who's good at the first three, or at least one of the first three? Okay, probably most people. All right, why? What's this called? We talked about it last class. It's not chunking. What? No, that's something else. The retention curve. Now this helps with retention, but also with retrieval. Yep, Matilli, that's correct. Okay, the serial position effect. Particularly, that's the primacy effect, remembering the first in a list. Who got one of the last couple ones? Okay, probably most people. What is that called? Recency effect. All right. Who got night? Probably most people. Why do people tend to get night? Why? It's repeated. Yep. Okay. Who got toss and turn? Or at least one of them. Okay. Why do people tend to get those, even though the two words themselves don't really have anything to do with the theme of it? All right, it's called semantic organization. Yep, toss and turn is a phrase associated with that. All right, and then who got artichoke? Okay, and why do we tend to remember artichoke? All right, it's random. Yep, the von Restorff effect. Now, who had sleep as one of theirs? Who put sleep down as one of the words? Okay, all right. If you put sleep down on Friday with B Day, I was doing this, and one person put in the chat. One person put in the chat. The only word I got was sleep. Like, oh, okay. All right. Well, sleep is never on there. Okay. If you put down sleep, then that is a false memory. All right. And that is how easy it is to create false memories. Okay. This is what is called memory reconsolidation or memory construction or just false memories. The idea that a lot of times the memories that we have are altered in some way, and some may be partially false, and some may be entirely false, even though they might feel like they are really real. One of the things that they found is that the more often we retrieve a memory, meaning like it's stored, the more often we pull it out. Every time we pull it out and put it back in, we alter little parts of it. We reconsolidate it. We kind of take it apart and then put it back together. All right. And so the more often memories are retrieved, the more likely it is that there might be incorrect aspects to it. So, like Landon said earlier, is this like when you tell a story a bunch of times and you start to, as you tell the story more and more, you start adding in like different details to make it maybe more of a more interesting story or whatnot. And all of a sudden, your memory of what happens, the story that you're telling, your memory of it may actually be entirely inaccurate. All right. But you've started to believe whatever the story is that you are telling. Same thing as like if you're lying about something, and say anybody ever lied so much about something that you actually started to believe that it was true? Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a false memory. Um, they've also found that um, like new information, new info can alter our memory of things. So, for instance, like there's a movie called My Friend Dahmer, which is true story. It was a graphic novel written by this guy named Dorf Bergdorf. I think that's his name. And he was one of Jeffrey Dahmer's only friends in high school. And the movie is about Dahmer in high school, and it kind of ends with with his first murder. But something like that, where somebody, and then they end up doing something awful, like that's going to alter your memory of them from that time, right? Because a lot of when we think about the things from the past, a lot of times we put them in the context of what we know at this moment. Now, in psychoanalytic psychology with Sigmund Freud, there is this idea of repression. Repression is called the cornerstone of psychoanalysis. And what Freud believed was that we can push anxiety, like some memories that we have that cause so much anxiety, we push them deep into our unconscious so that we are not consciously aware of them anymore. And it was Freud's responsibility to retrieve those memories, to pull those memories out of the unconscious, all right, to make the hidden not hidden anymore. Now, what they have found with repression is that more often than not, these are not hidden memories. These are false memories that the therapist has essentially implanted in your mind by asking certain questions. So, for instance, in the 1980s and 1990s, a lot of people started coming out and saying that they had been, when they were young, saying that they had been molested or sexually assaulted by their Catholic priest. And if anybody's ever seen the movie Spotlight, that's what this is about. It won the Oscar for Best Picture 5 years ago. I think it's on Netflix. It's really good. Okay. And this was absolutely true. Okay. The Catholic Church has a well known history of sexual abuse that has been covered up all the way to the top, like to the point where like the Pope knows about all of it, and they just have covered it up. But what they started seeing was that all of a sudden, a lot of people started coming forward and saying that they had been sexually abused by their priests. And a lot of it was true. But some of it they ended up finding was therapists essentially implanting false memories into their patients by asking them, "Oh, I didn't realize you were Catholic. Okay, were you ever in a room by yourself with your priest? Did they ever touch you in any way? Blah blah blah." All of these different things, and all of a sudden, it feels like they're pulling out this memory, right? When in reality, what was happening some of the time was that they were creating a false memory of it by just asking those questions. What they have learned about trauma is that the memories of trauma are generally more vivid than other memories. Okay. All right. We'll talk more about repression later on when we talk about defense mechanisms. We're almost done. So what they have found is that misleading information, what's called the misinformation effect, can distort our memories of things. The person that has done the or let's like and what I mean by that is like think about, has anybody ever had the thing where like somebody asks you like, "Hey, do you remember doing this?" And you're like, "No, I don't think I remember that." Then they start giving you details and you're like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I do remember that." And all of a sudden you have a memory of it, but it's not clear if the memory is actually real or not because you didn't start remembering it until you started getting details about it. Same thing could happen with like looking at pictures of things. Right? The person that has done the most amount of research on this, very famous psychologist, the woman named Elizabeth Loftus. She's still alive. She got interested in this because when she was 14, her mother drowned in their swimming pool. And she was told by her uncle later on that she was the one that found her mother in the swimming pool. And all of a sudden, she had this very vivid memory of finding her mother dead in the swimming pool. She found out later on as an adult that that was not true, that she had not, in fact, she had not been the one to find her mother. And she was kind of like, what the hell? Like, how do I have this vivid memory of this thing that never actually happened? So she started doing research on this. And a lot of this research has been tied back. A lot of what she has done is research eyewitness testimony. There was a case, and I linked the videos on Canvas. There's a 60 Minutes called Picking Cotton, which is about a woman who was raped in the 1970s at Elon University in Burlington. A guy broke into her apartment and raped her. And there was a police lineup, and she pointed at the guy that she was sure had done it. He was in prison for like 20 years. His name's Ronald Cotton. And then he was exonerated. And it was found that he actually was not the one who had raped her. And it was like, kind of like, well, how in the hell can somebody get raped and then choose the wrong person who did it? So a lot of what Loftus has done has not just been with false memories, but with how wording and all these different things can affect our memory. Now, her famous experiment, what she did was she had participants watch a car accident on video. And they all watched the exact same car accident. But afterwards, she asked them how fast were the cars going, either when they smashed into one another or when they bumped into one another. And what do you think the responses were like? Hmm? Exactly. Yep. The ones that were asked if smashed said that they thought the cars were going faster than bumped, even though everybody had seen the exact same accident. This is we talked about this last class. This is an example of priming. It's also what's called wording effects. We talked about it when we talked about surveys in Unit 1, how how wording of surveys can influence responses. But you can see just by changing this word, that changed the people's memory of what they experienced. All right, so to finish up, anybody have any questions? Finish up, we're going to watch a quick video. Okay, it's called Lost in the Mall. Okay, this is Loftus right here. This is one of her other famous studies where she tried to implant a false memory of somebody being lost in the mall as a child. So you'll see what happens here. Okay, so there you go. Okay, false memories. Try doing this with, say, if you have a little, if you have like a little sibling or whatnot, see if you can implant any false memories in them. Okay, have fun with it. All right, guys. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Next class, we'll talk about thinking. For next class, it might just be a recording because for tomorrow, I'm not sure if there are going to be a bunch of people who are going to skip class because of the inauguration or whatnot. So I may just put up a recording for tomorrow. And so, but I mean, I'll get on here, but I just want to let you know that might be what it is. Um, because of B Day tomorrow. Okay.